Thank you very much to each one of you. In 2010, in Australia, a young woman of 24 was found dead in a suspicious place under even more suspicious circumstances. Her case was almost forgotten when the death of another young woman brought the issue back to light. I'm Marcos. Welcome everyone to Insólito. And today, a special video to celebrate the channel's first anniversary and of course, the 50,000 subscribers the channel has recently reached. I prepared this special content here for you. Well, today's case is very thorough. It's quite delicate, controversial, and complex. It's also longer in duration and size than the usual cases here on the channel. I hope you like it. And to form an opinion about this case, you really have to watch the whole video, okay? So get settled in, make yourself comfortable, and let's get to the facts. Phoebe Handsjuk was born on May 9, 1986 in Melbourne, Australia. She was the eldest daughter of Len, a psychotherapist, and Nellery, a secretary, and had two younger brothers, Tom and Nikolai. As a child, Phoebe was the kind of kid who never stopped. She had an energy that seemed endless and was always cheerful. Very sociable, she had many friends and got along with everyone. When she was alone, Phoebe never got bored. With an extremely creative mind, she also had fun even when she was alone. Phoebe played many sports, but she really stood out in basketball, playing for the local team and competing in several states around Australia. In her early teens, her parents got divorced and that affected her a lot, even leading her to seek refuge in alcohol and drugs. Phoebe was always very intense. She threw herself into life's experiences. When she was doing well, she had a lot of fun, and when she was down, she suffered a lot. And when she loved deeply. Nellery, her mother, says that Phoebe's romantic relationships were almost obsessions. She gave herself completely, fell in love intensely, and most of the time lived a roller coaster of emotions. Although Phoebe had many friends and got along very well with her parents and siblings, especially with Tom, she had a truly strong connection with her maternal grandmother. Since she was little, her grandmother used to say that anything Phoebe wanted to talk about or get off her chest, she could count on her grandmother, and that the loyalty between them would always be maintained. And that's what Phoebe did. Everything, absolutely everything she went through and felt, she would tell her grandmother. Mature for her age, Phoebe started going to bars and nightclubs at 13, using a fake identification. By 15, she was already over 1.70 meters due to her height, so she would put on makeup and go unnoticed. No one suspected anything, and if they did, they let it go. One of her friends said that, besides them always getting into clubs without paying, Phoebe usually managed to get free drinks and drugs inside the place as well. With all this emancipated behavior, not to mention bold or even risky for someone so young, Phoebe started dating very early, and her preference was for older men. Her first serious relationship was at 16, with a teacher from her school, who was 30 years old at the time. The man even resigned so they could be together. Even knowing that this was an illegal relationship in terms of age, Phoebe's mother trusted her daughter's relationship and ended up allowing the two to live together. The relationship lasted about 3 years. Around this same time, she was diagnosed with depression and began treatment with medication and therapy. Still very young, Phoebe was already fighting tough internal battles against depression and drug use. Because of this, she didn't finish college and started working as a promoter for nightclubs. A situation that didn't help at all with the mental condition she was in. In May 2009, at the age of 23, she met Anthony Hampel, who was 42 years old, and they started dating. Anthony was a very influential event organizer in Australia, the son of a recently retired judge from the Supreme Court of Victoria, Australia, and his stepmother, the current judge of the court. Their relationship started like most relationships, full of love, companionship, and admiration for each other on social media and also in magazines. The couple always appeared posing in romantic destinations. Within 3 months, Phoebe moved in with Anthony in his apartment in a luxury condominium in Melbourne called Balance Apartments. But the honeymoon phase didn't last long. The fights between the two soon began, and the smile on Phoebe's face was often replaced by tears, causing her to gradually increase her therapy sessions and dependence on medication. In her conversations with close people, Phoebe said that she loved Anthony, but that the two of them were very different. She had a more laid-back style, and he was more organized and refined. Everyone around Phoebe noticed how much she had changed since she met Anthony. She no longer relaxed. She was always watching herself, afraid of saying or doing something that wouldn't please him. Phoebe didn't invite either her family or her friends to the apartment where she lived with Anthony. And on the very few occasions when her brother or her mother went up there, they noticed that there wasn't a single belonging of Phoebe's in the house. All the boxes with her personal belongings, like decorations, photos, and everything else, were still in a storage unit in the building's garage. In the house, there was simply nothing that reflected Phoebe. Everything belonged to Anthony and was just the way Anthony wanted it. The strangest part about this is that, as far as we know, she was even paying him rent. Because there are reports from employees saying that Anthony referred to Phoebe as his tenant, and as if that wasn't enough, the guy even interfered with the girl's appearance. At the beginning of the relationship, Phoebe became very close to Chrissy, Anthony's sister. For some reason, Chrissy started helping Phoebe get dressed and ready. Within a few months, Phoebe cut her hair short and dyed it black, just like Chrissy's. Entries in her diary prove the disillusionment. I don't know what he saw in me. I don't know what a man like that saw in me. I can't speak. I can't have an opinion. Everything I say is wrong. I'm stopping talking. I can't listen either. Because everything I hear isn't meant for me. Now everything is silence. I don't know what he saw in me then. I don't know what he still sees, since I'm not even myself anymore. It's time to end what is already over. Only illusion remains. In a year and a half of their relationship, the couple had already broken up and gotten back together 4 times. And the 5th time was about to happen. At the end of November, Phoebe traveled to her grandmother's house, and there, in a moment of clarity, she opened up about everything that was happening. The problems in the relationship and the drug use. She had many plans and dreams, and despite the love that was still there, she knew that with Antonio she would never fulfill any of her desires. Her grandmother advised her to do what her heart wanted, which was to end the relationship in a mature way and in person. She also guided her granddaughter, saying that many of the problems she had in life were because she didn't finish things completely and left many gaps open and unresolved with several people. And that this time it was time to mature and end the relationship in person. Phoebe then returned to Melbourne on November 29th, intending to put an end to her relationship with Anthony. But little did she know that he had bought a ring and was planning to propose to her soon. On December 1st, 2010, right in the middle of Wednesday at 10:30 in the morning, Phoebe's father, mother, siblings, grandparents, and some friends received a strange message on their phones that said, "Hi family, I'm in bed about to sleep, and when I wake up, I will have turned into the most amazing human being you've ever seen." But not really. I'm actually going to the hospital where I'll be safe and protected. I heard that tonight's menu will be tomato soup, delicious and nutritious. Now I have to go. I love all of you. but not enough to send a different message to each one of you. Sorry, but fortunately I have to sleep. After all, life is a dream. Kisses and hugs. The message was really strange, especially coming from someone they knew suffered from depression and anxiety. And for that reason, everyone got really worried and started calling each other, trying to figure out what was going on. Phoebe's mother was traveling at the time she received the message. She was on a plane, so she could only see the message later. However, the rest of the family was already calling Phoebe's cell phone insistently, but she wasn't answering. Her grandmother was the first to take the initiative to call Anthony. When she asked what was going on, if there was something wrong with her granddaughter, Anthony said he hadn't noticed anything unusual with Phoebe. He said he left for work early and saw Phoebe sleeping next to her dog Yoshi, recovering from a bad mood after drinking the night before. The whole family knew that Phoebe had her ups and downs, and from what Anthony was describing, the night before had been one of her lows. But so that their grandmother wouldn't worry, Anthony said he would go back home to check on her and see if she was okay. It's not known whether he actually went or not. What is known is that the next day, a Thursday, December 2nd, Anthony and Phoebe had a dinner scheduled with her father at a Thai restaurant, which was their favorite. Her father even reassured the family by saying that he would be with them soon and would take a close look to see what the real situation was. Lynn was a psychiatrist and knew how to recognize when her daughter was having a drug relapse or was in a depression crisis. So as soon as she left work, Lynn called her daughter to say she was already on her way to the restaurant, but her daughter didn't answer and the call went to voicemail. Lynn assumed she was in the shower and didn't leave a message, planning to call back soon. Not even a minute after the call, Lynn's phone rings, but it wasn't Phoebe, it was Anthony. When Lynn answered and Anthony said it was him, Lynn immediately said, "Hi, so I just called Phoebe now, just to say I'm already on my way. See you there." But Anthony replies, "But I just got home and she's not here." Lynn was confused. And now where could she be? Anthony then says that she must be around for sure because she knew about the dinner. And another thing, her purse with the car keys was in the apartment. Although Anthony seemed pretty unconcerned, Lynn was not okay with it. He felt that something was off. Given the messages from the previous day and his daughter's entire history, he panicked and started calling everyone in the family. He asked if anyone had spoken to her during the day or had any kind of contact with her. But the answer from each person was not what Lynn expected to hear. No one had seen or spoken to Phoebe. After 20 minutes, Lynn received another call from Anthony saying that Phoebe had been found, but unfortunately, she was dead. Lynn received the news like a knockout. At that moment, he was disoriented, dizzy, completely shaken. Think about it. He was on his way to a restaurant to meet his daughter, and the worst part, it was his birthday. Nothing could be worse for a father, right? But Lynn had to pull himself together quickly, at least try to go into autopilot mode, because it would be his responsibility to call the rest of the family. Everyone was surprised, right? Unless someone is in a terminal state of some illness, no one expects a call like that. But Lynn and Nellery were exceptionally surprised by the news about the way their daughter was found, which made the situation even more painful and harder to swallow. Phoebe was found by the building's janitor lying inside the condominium's garbage chute. At 7:04 post-meridium, the janitor's electronic key records the moment she accesses the basement where the service area was located. Someone had knocked over a flower pot in the lobby, and she had to go down to the storage room to get a broom. When she tried to open the door to the small room where the cleaning products and also the trash compactor were kept, she realized the door wouldn't open. Something was blocking the door from the inside. When the janitor forced the door, it started to open. That's when she saw a foot on the floor covered in blood. Afraid, she let go of the door and looked through a window in that storage room and saw Phoebe's body lying in a huge pool of blood. Without touching Phoebe to see if she was still alive, the packer immediately called the police. And when they arrived at the scene, the police determined that the young woman had fallen down the garbage chute from the 12th floor and landed in the compactor. When she fell, her ankle went straight into the pressure blade, being severely cut and left attached to her body only by a tendon, causing Phoebe to suffer a fatal hemorrhage. At first, the police told Phoebe's parents that her death was either a suicide or some kind of accident caused by herself. But the young woman's parents didn't quite understand that explanation. Something didn't add up there. How does someone choose a dumpster to commit suicide? One detail that supports the lack of sense in the police's initial explanation is that these dumpsters are too small. The shape and type of opening are designed precisely to make an accident as difficult as possible. In addition, there is a system that closes automatically so that, for example, a child can't get in out of playfulness or curiosity and end up falling in. Not to mention that the tunnel between the trash chute on each floor and the compactor is extremely narrow. I mean, who would choose such a painful way to die? That didn't make any sense to Phoebe's family. When the autopsy was completed, the results only brought even more questions. The 83-page report stated that Phoebe had 0.16% alcohol in her blood. That's 3 times the legal limit in Australia if she were driving, for example. And traces of Stilnox, which is a medication that contains a substance called zolpidem in its formula. Zolpidem is a drug prescribed for the treatment of insomnia. That is, for those people who have difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep because it acts on the sleep centers located in the brain. The medication starts to take effect within 30 minutes after taking the tablet, and it reduces the number of nighttime awakenings, increasing the total duration of sleep and improving its quality. Guys, pay attention. Like I said, there are lots of details, so stay tuned. This medication should be administered with caution in patients who show symptoms of depression or have suicidal tendencies. A major danger is also the interaction with alcohol. Both alcohol and zolpidem are substances that slow down the body system. Zolpidem does immediately what alcohol does over a longer period of time. And together, they make the respiratory system slower and can sedate the user for a long period of time. Psychiatrically, the combination can be even more dangerous. There are reports of people who took zolpidem, fell asleep, and suddenly got up and went driving while asleep. The combination also causes psychological effects like hallucinations. Some users become violent, acting in strange ways and performing tasks without knowing what they're doing. And they also don't retain any memory of the incidents. The result is often embarrassing behavior and even accidents. And it was precisely this combination, along with the reports from FIB's psychologist and the information about the medications she was taking to treat depression, that determined her death could have been either a homicide, a suicide, or even an accident. In Victoria, Australia, the person who determines the cause and manner of death is a professional called a coroner. That guy is equivalent to our medical examiner. And just like in the United States, the United Kingdom, and some other countries, the coroner doesn't need to have a medical degree. In Australia's case, he only needs to have a bachelor's degree in any field and go through specific training. Depending on what the coroner decides, he can send the body to a medical examiner, a forensic examiner, or a forensic pathologist. Or, as in most cases, to none of them. And he himself, since he is considered the highest authority before the Crown, decides and signs the cause and manner of death. And in the Australian political structure, coroners are appointed to the position by the judge of the state court, a position held by Anthony's stepmother. And they answer to the Supreme Court of Justice, which was previously held by George Hemphill, Anthony's father. The term used for the standard procedure, which determines the cause and manner of death, is known as a coronial investigation, which is different from an autopsy. In the Australian procedure, the coroner examines the victim's body, performing almost all the steps of an autopsy. He talks to witnesses and those involved, as well as the medical and psychiatric professionals responsible for this victim. And finally, he analyzes the circumstances reported in the first hours of the police investigation. Now, in Phoebe's case, what police investigation? There was no police investigation. Yeah, that's right, there wasn't one. And before I explain what the police did at the scene, I'm going to finish pointing out some details from the autopsy report. Let me say this first, there's no point criticizing those who speak against the police. I'm just stating the facts, okay? Before you let your emotions take over, think. Analyze it to see if it's really worth it. According to Phoebe's injuries, the coroner determined that she had fallen feet first, not head first. She had severe abrasions on the outer sides of her shoulders, elbows, and hands, mostly on the outer side, not on the palms, which indicated that she had fallen with her arms down by her sides. A test done with a weight equal to Phoebe's showed that the fall would have taken 3 to 4 seconds. In the fall, she fractured her femur and some other bones in the lower part of her body, but she didn't have any damage to any internal organs. Sergeant Butterworth reported that when he entered the trash room, Phoebe was lying in a pool of blood behind the door, which indicates that she was trying to get out. After falling down the chute, which according to the report lasted 3 to 4 seconds, Phoebe landed directly in the compactor, which was turned off. Her ankle hit the steel blade directly, cutting her foot. But Phoebe still managed to get out of the garbage compactor and tried to crawl to the door. When she was found, her jeans were pulled down below her knees, and there was no sign of sexual abuse. As soon as he arrived at the scene, the sergeant found Anthony in the lobby and accompanied him to his apartment to collect some of Phoebe's documents. The sergeant there noticed broken glass on the floor, and one of the photos he took shows a takeout food bag on the counter. And, my friends, remember this. He asked Anthony a few questions and left. There was no need to open an inquiry because the sergeant saw it as a suicide. So, no fingerprints were collected from the apartment door, nor were any electronic devices that could be useful in the investigation, such as cell phones and computers, seized. The footage from the condominium's cameras over the last 24 hours was also not collected. Only a small recording from the security system was obtained, which showed residents of the building, including Phoebe, leaving the condominium because of a fire alarm that was triggered by mistake. Other than that, nothing. No statements, nothing at all. The most absurd thing is that they didn't collect absolutely any trace of trash from the trash can. The only thing the police officer did was test fingerprints from the trash drawer on the 12th floor and from the walls. The result, no fingerprints. But then, how could Phoebe have opened the door, which was a meter above the ground, and gotten inside without touching it? How could the handle of a trash bin in a condominium have no fingerprints at all? At the very least, that suggests it was completely cleaned before the test, don't you think? There were no cameras in the apartment hallways, and it was impossible to prove that someone had thrown Phoebe down the trash chute. It was impossible to prove that she jumped by herself. For the condominium and the police, the information collected over the course of an hour seemed to be enough. After all, what happened was already terrible news for the residents and for the reputation of the place. But a suicide would cause less stress than the possibility of a murderous killer having access to the building or even being a resident there. Now, for Phoebe's parents and especially for her grandfather, that was not an option. Phoebe's grandfather was a retired local police detective, and he simply couldn't rest seeing the way everything was being handled. As soon as he was informed of his granddaughter's death and the way everything happened, he went to the building. to see for himself what kind of dumpster they were talking about. He took several photos, made a video of the areas, and measured everything. Everything. The door, the dumpster, the space inside it, the walls, everything. And he concluded that the largest possible opening the trash drawer door could make measured 37 by 22 centimeters. That is, if someone held the door open from the outside because the flap spring was extremely strong. Phoebe's grandfather was completely convinced that it would have been absolutely impossible for his granddaughter to have managed to do that by herself. So, in order to prove in court that his granddaughter hadn't jumped, he had a replica of the hallway and the dumpster built, made exactly with the same materials as the originals from the building, drywall walls with concrete, a dumpster of the same brand, same size and same model installed at the same height. And a friend of Phoebe helped with the tests, since she had almost the same measurements as her, both in height and weight. And in the tests, which were filmed and broadcast by the program 60 Minutes from Australia, the friend attempts to search the trash alone. Phoebe's grandfather asks her to try using every possible way, and even then, she can only get through when he helps her by holding the flap open. Now think about it, if it was that hard for this girl, who was normal and sober, to get in there. It was practically impossible, since she only managed it when Phoebe's grandfather held the little door open for her to get through. Now just imagine for Phoebe, who had alcohol in her bloodstream and those drugs that cause everything I mentioned. It's important to remember that, according to the coroner's analysis, the abrasions indicated that she would have fallen with her arms facing down. But the only possible way would be with her arms up, especially since she fell feet first, not head first. Anthony only spoke with Nellery, Phoebe's mother, once after the incident and never agreed to talk to her again. The only conversation he had was with the coroner the day after the incident and in the presence of his lawyers, where he told his version of the events. Anthony said that when they started dating, Phoebe had no idea about his struggles with alcohol and drugs. He also reported that she controlled herself well at the start of the relationship, but as time went by, she started feeling more comfortable with him and his friends. She began drinking increasingly. And he added that Anthony mentioned the first time Phoebe went overboard was during a birthday party, where she drank and took off all her clothes at the party. He then picked her up to take her to the car, and on the way she slapped him in the face. According to the guy, the next day she apologized 1,000 times, and that's when she had her first major depression crisis. She insulted herself, said she was a disaster, and he would end up feeling sorry for her, buying her flowers, making her happy, and eventually forgiving her. And she would be fine for 2 or 3 weeks, and then that's it, she would do it again. Anthony also regretted that he never knew what kind of Phoebe he would find when he got home from work. In addition, there are many other accounts from Anthony about his girlfriend's crises and emotional instability, who, according to him, saw problems in therapy, at work, at the gym, basically in life, in her routine. In short, my friends, as we have seen, according to the young man, all this instability ended up weakening their relationship, to the point where she said that Anthony wouldn't let her be herself, when in fact he was just trying to help her. All of this, according to Anthony, okay. On November the 29th, after Phoebe returned from her grandmother's, they had dinner at a couple's house who were Anthony's friends. She had been acting strange since the moment he stopped by the house to pick her up. When they arrived at the party, she started drinking and told the friend's wife, Jessica, that she was going to break up with Anthony that night because they were nothing alike. At the table, she poured brandy, something he said you shouldn't drink with food, and wanted to toast the end of the relationship. He thought that was in extremely poor taste, so he got in the car and left Phoebe alone at their friend's house. She called a cab then and went to their apartment, where she arrived drunk and went straight to sleep. On the 30th, she slept all day, and Antonio said they didn't talk to each other. On December 1st, when he left for work and saw the iPhone he had given her broken on the table, he took it with him to get the screen fixed. He also wrote her a note that said, "I've reached my limit. I helped you the way I could, and after everything, I was still humiliated. I'm taking the gift I gave you to fix it. After all, I'm the fix-it-all, aren't I? And are you tired of seeing me trying to fix you?" That day, they didn't talk to each other anymore either. And the next day, when Anthony left for work, Phoebe was sleeping. In interviews, people who knew Phoebe confirmed her drug dependency and her constant problems in relationships. Her family also never denied these facts. Phoebe really was facing many difficulties, especially in the days leading up to her death. But even so, there were still things that didn't add up. Like, for example, when the police went up to Anthony's apartment on the night of the incident, they asked to see the computer and noticed blood on the mouse. Even so, they didn't send the computer for forensic analysis or collect blood samples. So to this day, it's not known whether the blood was Phoebe's or not. There was also blood on the doorknob, but it wasn't tested either. In the pocket of her jeans, there was a small piece of paper with a phone number on it, which was never mentioned in the reports. That little piece of paper was only found by Phoebe's family when the clothes were returned to them. They called, but the number was for a non-existent phone. There was a dinner scheduled with Phoebe's father that day to celebrate his birthday. So, why did Anthony order food to the apartment? Do you remember that? Well, so we can try to look at both sides and not be unfair. Since, given the complex circumstances of the case, just imagine the guy's frustration. The woman kept messing up, she didn't get any better, she didn't keep her word, not even when it was time to celebrate her father's birthday. Maybe, hypothetically, that's what went through the man's mind when he ordered the food. She wasn't in the apartment, do you remember? Now, the fact that there isn't even a single fingerprint on the trash can or on the surrounding walls, that's the most intriguing part. For that reason, the young woman's family filed a request to review the case, claiming that there was negligence on the part of the police who did not follow investigative protocols. But the request was denied. They then filed a petition for another professional to review the coroner's investigation, and that professional said that the result, due to the lack of information, was inconclusive. Therefore, the case was practically forgotten by the press and the public. Until in June of 2018, something very, let's say, strange happened. A 25-year-old model resident of Melbourne named Bailey Schneider was found dead in the kitchen of her house with a rope around her neck. The police were called, and upon confirming her death, the coroner, Dr. White, the same one from Phoebe's case, was sent to the crime scene, which he analyzed and determined the manner of death as suicide. Even though he couldn't explain where the rope had been hung, the young woman's parents didn't understand what was happening. They just wanted an explanation, something that proved it was suicide. The coincidences didn't stop there. The young woman had problems with alcohol and used drugs and medication for depression. And besides working as a model, she also worked as an assistant at a clinic. And on the night of her death, she had ended her 6-month relationship with an event industry businessman, Anthony Hemphill. A year after Bailey's death, her parents managed to get the homicide division to agree to review the case, and Bailey's death is now being investigated. And still about the mysterious death of Phoebe Handsjuk, there's something strange that adds even more spice to the case. Anthony's sister Chrissy, who became very close friends with Phoebe and was even the one who lent her clothes, advised her and supplied her with drugs, was arrested in 2014 for drug trafficking. A huge investigation arrested several drug dealers, including her, who posted bail and didn't even end up staying in jail. And in 2016, when a resolution was published about the review of coroner Dr. White's analysis, Chrissy made a post on Facebook. It was a photo of Phoebe with the caption, "You were a fragile flower that no one ever watered." You and your family ended up being neglected by the justice system, which failed to represent you for some reason. Chrissy deleted the post hours later. Yeah, like I said, it's all very complex, controversial, isn't it? And what do you think? Do you think Phoebe did this alone, or did she have help from someone? And Bailey? In her parents' kitchen, where she was found, there was nowhere she could have tied the rope. The police, also at the time, didn't collect her cell phone or even the rope itself for forensic analysis. It's all very strange, isn't it? Richard Baker and Michael Bachelard, two investigative journalists, became very interested in this case and, in 2016, recorded a podcast. Just to discuss the death of Phoebe Handsjuk, the show is called Phoebe's Fall. Phoebe's family also made a website for the case. And for anyone who wants to take a look, the address is the one that's showing up. Pretty heavy case, right? That was today's video. Don't forget to leave your like, comment, and if you can, share this video with your friends. I also ask you to consider supporting the channel by becoming a member, because that's essential for keeping these videos going, okay? As we know, the platform usually isn't very friendly to those who produce true crime content. Thank you all once again for being here with me on this journey of 50,000 subscribers heading towards 100,000. I'll stop here. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.